Before we descend further into the archives, a very necessary warning. The narrative we're about to explore contains descriptions of extreme domestic violence, homicide, and the desecration of human remains. These events are not works of fiction, but they are documented under the actions of Anthony Alexander Oliver. This content is intended for mature audiences and mature audiences only. If you find yourself sensitive to such themes such as sexual violence or clinical details to forensic pathology, please proceed with caution. Viewer discretion is strongly advised, and remember that your mental state matters more than a viewer count. Ensure that you are in a safe place. Every morning, millions of people wake up to share a cup of coffee with their loved one and then step out into the world. We operate under the bedrock of trust. We believe that the person who knows our secrets, our fears, our vulnerabilities is the person least likely to weaponize them. We call this person home. But what happens when that home becomes a hunting ground? What happens when the person you've built a life with decides that your life is no longer yours to keep? Today, we're traveling to the Central Valley of California, Bakersfield, a place known for its oil fields, its heat, and its stoicism. But in 2018, Bakersfield became the backdrop for a crime that challenged the limits of human depravity. It isn't just a story about murder, it's a story about what happens after the heart stops beating, a descent into the darkness so profound that the law struggled to even categorize it. The records are unsealed, the evidence is now laid out, and let us begin. To understand the crime, we must understand the place. Bakersfield, California sits at the southern end of San Joaquin Valley. It's the city of toughness. It's a place where sun bleaches the pavement and the air is thick with the scent of agriculture and industry. It's a town where people mind their own business usually. In the summer of 2018, the heat was unreeling. In such conditions, doors usually stay shut, air conditioners hum to drown out the rest of the world, and neighbors become collectors of their own isolated bubbles. But inside of one of these bubbles, at the residence on Denton Way, the life of a woman, a wife, and a mother has reached its end. Anthony Alexander Oliver was, by outward appearances, a man intrigued into his community. He wasn't just a drifter, he wasn't a shadow in the woods, but he was a husband. But sadly, domestic violence is a predator that wears a familiar face. It lives in the mask of sanity. Now for a direct quote from the National Institute of the Justice Archive. The most dangerous place for a woman is not a dark alleyway. Statistically, it's her own home. The person most likely to kill her is not a stranger, but the person who claims to love her most. Psychologists often speak about masking, the ability of a violent individual to present a normal, even charming facade to the rest of the world, while being a monster behind closed doors. Oliver's mask was extremely thick. Neighbors never heard her scream, and there were never any midnight police visits that led up to the final act. There was only the quiet, simmering pressure of a man who viewed his partner not as a person, but as property. On August 24th, 2018, the pressure finally shattered the vessel. Though we can't really dwell on the mechanics of the struggle. What matters is the result. Anthony Oliver murdered his wife. In that moment, the legal definition of his life changed from a citizen to a killer. But for Oliver, the death of his wife wasn't a tragedy to be hidden, it was an opportunity. In a standard homicide, a killer would experience one of three things: Panic usually would end up leading to a clumsy attempt to hide the body. Remorse, which would often lead to a confession or even in some cases self harm, or cold calculation, which usually leads to to a sophisticated disposal of evidence. But Oliver chose a fourth and far more disturbing path. He chose stasis. He remained in the home with the body. He didn't call for help. He didn't flee to any border. He stayed in the he stayed in the Denton Way residence as the California heat began to do its own work to the physical form of his victim. And it was in this period, while the world outside continued to work and buy groceries like an every day-to-day citizen would, that Oliver began his true descent. Between August 24th and August 26th, Anthony Oliver engaged in multiple acts of necrophilia with his wife's remains. To the humankind, this is the ultimate taboo. It's the bridge between violence and some kind of paraphilia that suggests a total lack of empathy. In the eyes of the law, murder is taking, necrophilia is desecration. Oliver had already taken everything she had. He then decided to take the dignity that she was owed in death. When Bakersfield Police Department finally entered the home, they weren't prepared for the scene. A murder scene is usually a snapshot of a moment of high emotion. The Oliver home was a museum of prolonged depravity. The investigation required a delicate balance of traditional detective work and advanced forensic pathology. Because the body had been kept in the house for several days in California heat, the timeline was very critical. Now we're going to end up going down the evidence types and the forensic findings and whatnot, and how the significance affects the case overall. The toxicology, with the toxicology report, there was no defensive drugs found in the victim at all. But this also suggests a sudden, overwhelming physical assault. The the entomology report found a blowfly activity consistent with 48 to 72 hours, confirming that the body had been home since the 24th. DNA profiling showed that there was Oliver's DNA inside of postmortem injuries, which shows that it was a provided undeniable proof of necrophilia. Digital forensics shows browser history and the phone pings also showed that Oliver was active and present during the desecration. But why? This is the question that haunts every true crime archive. In the case of Anthony Oliver, psychologists are pointed toward a Class 1 or Class 2 necrophile. Class 1 is characterized by a desire of the non-resisting partner, while Class 2 categorizes by a romantic attachment to the deceased, often seen in cases of extreme bewilderment. Through Oliver's case, it leans more towards a power dominance. By violating the corpse, Oliver was asserted a level of control that was impossible with living. It's an ultimate expression of an abuser's dream, a victim who cannot speak, can't move, and can't fight back. The legal system's often criticized for its pace, but in cases this sensitive, every I must be dotted. Oliver was arrested in 2018, but it would take 5 years for the final gavel to fall. During the trial, the prosecution had to walk a fine line. They had to present the evidence of the murder while also detailing the necrophilia, a charge that under California Penal Code 297 is treated as a separate felony offense. The defense attempt the defense attempted to argue that various states of mental health, but evidence of Oliver's deliberate actions when he stayed in his own home and his failure to seek for help, while also his repeated violations of the body, pointed not to a snap per se, but to a choice. In the archives, we often lose the victim in the shadow of the monster, but the woman Oliver killed was a mother. She had children who were left to navigate a world where their father was a murderer and their mother was a tragedy. The impact statements delivered in court weren't just about weren't just about loss of life. They were about loss of safety. Like, how do you explain to a child that monsters under the bed sometimes can be the person tucking them in? In August of 2023, almost 5 years to the day of the murder, Anthony Alexander Oliver was sentenced. The judge never showed any leniency. The crimes were described as hideous, atrocious, and cruel. Legal benchmarks that justify the harsh possible penalties. Oliver was sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder, with an additional time for the act of necrophilia. Because he was sentenced to life without any possibility of parole, he would now die in California State Prison. We look at this case and we feel a sense of otherness. We want to believe that Anthony Oliver is a different species than us. But the horror of true crime is the realization that he's not. He's a man who made a series of choices. He allowed the seed of darkness to grow until it consumed his humanity. The sanctuary of the home is a fragile thing. It's held together by invisible threads of mutual respect and social contracts. While a man like Oliver cuts those threads, he doesn't just kill a person, he kills the idea for safety for anyone who hears the story. The house on Denton Way likely has new occupants now. The walls have now been repainted and the air is now clear. Life in Bakersfield moves on, as it must. But for those who study the archives, and the case of Anthony Alexander Oliver remains a permanent entry. It serves as a grim reminder that the most terrifying things in this world don't actually require any supernatural powers. It only requires a human heart that's gone cold. As we close this chapter of the archives, please take a breath. Look at the people in your life. Appreciate the mundane, quiet safety of a normal evening, because the darkness is always there, waiting for the door to be left unlocked. Not on a house, but on a soul.